Andrew, there's been a lot of talk this year about the concept of what rights a government has the right to infringe upon, and what freedoms we should be able to maintain in all circumstances. Like, do you think that we have inalienable rights? Like, is there things that we are like physically born with that we can have taken away from us, or is that sort of at the behest of society?
Well, if you go to some countries around the world, nobody has any rights at all. So I suppose the answer to that is no. But we live in a Western liberal democracy, a supposedly enlightened democracy, and therefore we've had those rights for many centuries. Therefore, we would regard them as that we're born with those particular rights. Now, referring to the pandemic, when I was looking at scenes particularly in Italy, in northern Italy last year, and looking what was happening, then I wasn't sure at all. I was quite frightened of what was actually going to hit the UK at some point. So for the government to take some sort of action, well, we supported it. The problem is we're almost a year on from that situation, and we've been promised the return of our freedoms on so many occasions. The vaccine was going to be the silver bullet, for example, and yet we still don't have them. And we still don't know whether we're going to get our freedoms fully back in June. It could even be extended later on in the year. We may not get them back this year. We simply don't know. And that's my problem at the moment.
I mean, I can already hear the response that I know a lot of people would give, and they'd say, this is for our own good. It's because we need to protect the elderly, the vulnerable, the population. People aren't smart enough to make their own decisions. I've heard a few people make that comment, including James O'Brien, who I've become incredibly disappointed with of late. I mean, I was never his biggest fan, but he's really decided that he is the arbiter of other people's lives. And I guess that's the real debate that we're having here in the country or in the world about this, and it's like about how much the government are allowed to control or have a say in what we do in our personal lives. And I assume you would believe they've taken a step too far.
I think they've taken a hop, skip, and a jump too far. To be perfectly honest, we can see when we look at the data from other countries, and Sweden didn't initially lock down at all. In fact, schools continued, whereas our schools were disrupted really for the best part of 6 months in so many different ways. Some examples in the United States, where California was and New York State was, both of them were very strict in their lockdowns. Other states were not strict by any means. In fact, allowed people a lot more freedom, and the death tolls are pretty much the same. So what does it say? I always believe in the good sense of people, and if people feel that they're vulnerable and that they could get seriously ill or possibly die from COVID, then they will take all the necessary precautions to protect themselves. There are very few really reckless people around, and those reckless people would be reckless anyway. You can have a lockdown, yet there's still raves going on, illegal raves and things like that. So those people, irrespective of whether it's the law that you can't mix or whether it's a vice that you shouldn't mix and you should use your own judgment, those people will still do exactly the same. They won't change.
I mean, there's obviously always going to be people who are going to break these kind of rules. And I guess, like, for me, the comparison that I keep making is, so I was in Austria for a couple of months there, hoping to work, and it didn't really work out. But at the top of the mountain, there's where the restaurant-y thing is. There's a whole bunch of benches, and they said that we weren't allowed to sit there when we went up the mountain. So first they cordoned it off with tape, and then that didn't work because people ignored the tape. So they built these like block things so people couldn't sit except one person, and there was like a wooden block, so there was a meter between each person. So people just moved over and sat somewhere else, and I kept comparing it to trying to block a river by throwing stones in. It's like, you might block some of it, but people are just going to find a way around it. Like the water's still going to keep flowing, and it's very hard to like intervene in human nature in that way, I think.
I agree with you. And also, people have to be persuaded that those particular laws and restrictions are worthwhile, are sensible. Now, I just don't see how people sitting apart on a bench is going to somehow create a huge spike in COVID cases, because it's not. I mean, do you remember the case in I think it was in Derbyshire, where the police there fined two friends who travelled to this particular beauty spot in separate cars, had a cup of coffee in their hands, and they accused them of going for a picnic. Of course, those fines were rescinded because no one felt they were justified. But the sillier the rules, I mean, the rule of six that we've got in the UK, or had in the UK, and I believe we're going to go back to it, it just is not based in it's not based in science. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a figure that's just been plucked out of thin air. A children's birthday party in a garden is illegal. Children running around, even though they're in the same bubble at school, because very young children. I mean, they tend to invite all their friends from the school class, don't they, along to their party. So they're all in the same bubble anyway, and yet it's illegal to have a children's birthday party in a garden in the fresh air. And all of these things are just simply not justified, and people will ignore them, and people do ignore them. It still happens now. All right, it's still a little bit chilly at the moment. The weather's not exactly brilliant, but given another month, it's going to be a lot better. And if some of these ridiculous rules are still in place, I can guarantee that no one will pay any attention to them at all.
I mean, I'm finding it very, very difficult to get like a grasp on what the public opinion is on all of this, because I mean, on one second I see, like, say the debate between Dan Hodges and Peter Hitchens, and I looked at like the comments and responses to it, and all of it, like, and I mean every single one, is people being like, Dan, you got schooled, Peter's a hero, things like that. Like, just loving Peter Hitchens, like for many quite obvious reasons, and a few that are maybe a little more subtle. But then I'll see polls of people from, like, say, YouGov or whatever, or I think Survation did a few on like vaccine passports for people like going into the supermarket, and they were saying like 60% of people were in favor of this, and I was like, hang on a second, like, what is going on here? Like, where is the public opinion on these issues?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I don't seem to meet very many people who think that all of this is a wonderful idea. I meet plenty of people who are frightened, and I guess that they would reply to pollsters in that particular way. But I do wonder if some people say, oh, yes, we should keep these restrictions, and I always obey the rules, because that's what they're supposed to say to the pollster, but actually don't really believe in them and don't really stick to the rules very much themselves. I think there's a lot of that. Well, there's obviously a lot of that going on, isn't there?
Yeah.
And who do the pollsters speak to? I mean, I'm 50 years old, and an opinion pollster has never spoken to me. I've never had a call. I've never been asked to do an online survey, nothing. So who do they actually talk to? It makes me wonder.
Yeah, I mean, this is a point a friend of mine often makes when we're talking about opinion polls. Because he's signed up for YouGov, he likes to sort of keep an eye on what's being asked, essentially. So he'll always send me screenshots, and he always makes the point that, like, look, who are the people who are sitting around at home wanting to do like political polling online for like a tiny bit of extra cash, like £1 or something, maybe not even. And it's people who are interested in this already. So I guess like, especially like online polls are becoming, I would probably say, less and less reliable. I mean, maybe some people would disagree.
Well, I think they probably are. And polling in general, it hasn't really been going very well for them in the last few years. And I know it's they try to turn it into a science by weighting samples and things like that. But they have had their problems. without a doubt. I mean, the one pollster that I do trust implicitly, and that's Sir John Curtis. And I've got when he does that exit poll, general elections and things like that, I've got an insight on how he does it. He uses one polling station in a friend's constituency, a friend who's the MP, and he's so accurate, isn't he? I mean, he can seem to predict the general election down to about 3 or 4 seats. So, if John Curtis says something, I tend to believe him, but the rest I take with a pinch of salt, maybe. And of course, it does all depend on the sample. I don't think you can really sort of say that it's a legitimate poll unless the samples are in the thousands, not 500 or 600. And I think that's when there's some wild inaccuracies there.
I mean, I guess it's probably, I don't know, it's maybe like easier than ever, but still very close to impossible to get like a really representative sample of like the opinions in the United Kingdom based on like a few hundred people, even based on like a few thousand people. It's gotta be difficult. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.